for being here tonight. So grateful to see you all here. My name is Dr. Nicole Lozano. I'm a associate professor of psychology, and I'm also the chair of the E. James Holland Symposium on American Values. So for this evening, I want to tell you a little bit about the Holland Symposium and what we do, and introduce our speaker, who has been incredible. I've been with her most of the day, and I'm just so excited by everything she has to say. So the symposium is named in honor of its creator, E. James Holland. He is retired dean of the ASU College of Liberal and Fine Arts, and it was designed to bring the ASU community and the public together to reflect on issues related to the country's values. The Holland Symposium has brought to campus noted scholars from a variety of fields, including ecology, sociology, psychology, political science, education, and business. And this year, we are so pleased to bring to campus Dr. Renee Hobbs. Dr. Hobbs is one of the world's leading authorities on digital and media literacy education. As a teacher, researcher, activist, and media professional, she has offered programs for educators on 4 continents and produced some of the leading empirical research on the subject. She's actually headed to Brussels next week, so she got to stop and see Angela along the way. As a trailblazing educator, author, and media literacy advocate, Renee Hobbs has dedicated her life to empowering individuals of all ages to navigate the complex landscape of information, entertainment, and persuasion. With a career spanning decades, Renee has been a leading voice in the field of media literacy, tirelessly promoting critical thinking, digital citizenship, and media creation skills. Her passion is infectious, and her expertise is unparalleled. Again, I have loved getting to be with her today. So, at the University of Rhode Island, she serves as a co-director of the Graduate Certificate in Digital Literacy, a professional development program for educators that was officially recognized in the U.S. Office of Education's National Education Technology Plan. Hobbs has provided staff development to educators from across the United States and on 4 continents around the world. Over 25 years, she has developed award-winning multimedia curriculum and has published more than 150 scholarly articles, which is very impressive, professional publications, as well as many books. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Renee Hobbs to the stage.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction and the opportunity to address you as part of the Holland Symposium. You know, leaders leave a legacy, and the Holland Symposium's legacy is a really important way that the community comes together. So I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. I want to start a little bit by inviting you to visit my lab. My lab is an online space. It's www.mediaeducationlab. Right now, we're running a 6-week program for 55 college educators and high school educators and middle school educators called the Media Ed Institute. We come together Wednesday nights from 7 to 9, and then we work independently on a threaded discussion and other blended learning tools. And we are learning together about what it means to teach media literacy education integrated into our existing subjects and areas of interest and expertise. We're all learners. We say at the Media Education Institute, everyone learns from everyone. And I want to tell you a story about what's motivated my intellectual curiosity about media literacy for so long.
There's an alert going off.
Is it a tornado? Oh, too bad. Oh, I like exciting weather. When I was getting a PhD at Harvard University a long, long time ago, before most of you were even born, I wanted to write about media literacy. It was a new concept and a new idea. And my instructor, my faculty supervisor, a very distinguished fellow, said, "You can't write about media literacy, there's no literature on the subject." And I was like, yes, that's right, and that's what I want to solve by writing a dissertation about it. But no, he held firm, and I wrote a dissertation on a related topic, studying how people learn from television news. Short answer, they don't. But in the years to come, I guess I did want to prove him wrong. right? I did want to prove him wrong, and I helped to create a literature in the field and a scholarly journal for the growing community of scholars, and I feel super happy that the concept of media literacy has taken off all over the world, and it's fascinating to see what media literacy looks like in Japan, right? What it looks like in Singapore, what it looks like in Brazil. Right after the Brazilians had their January 6th moment, on January 10th, where they stormed the Capitol in Brasilia, the very first act that the new president made was to establish a cabinet-level officer for a media literacy minister. So they're taking it very seriously in Brazil as an aspect of civic education. So these are some of the media-related challenges that we face in 2024. And it's possible that if I asked you, you could identify which ones you think are most important or which ones are most relevant to you. Some of us are worried about digital addiction and dependency. It's like our devices are glued to our hands. We sleep with them next to our pillows, and we feel anxious and out of sorts if we're not near them, using them maybe as much as 10 hours a day. Some of us are concerned about the polarized political climate and its impact on democratic decision-making, and we recognize how media contribute to that polarized political climate by rewarding extreme statements. Some people are concerned about propaganda and disinformation. They recognize how easy it is to spread propaganda and disinformation in ways that really can affect public opinion. Some people are concerned about the centralized power of digital platforms. There's 5 of them, and they influence every aspect of billions of people around the globe. Some of us are concerned about data security, scams, and cybercrime. You might not know this, but billions of dollars have been spent by universities like yours, where a hacker gets in and messes with the records and threatens to destroy or release the files if they're not paid $1 million in ransom. And that's happened at thousands of colleges and universities all over the country. So much so that St. Angela University, like probably most universities, probably has insurance for that, right? Because that's now a new secondary industry, right? Insurance against data security problems. Some of you might recognize the way in which media is influencing people's mental health, right? How we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our relationships, how we sense our adequacy in the world. Some of you have stopped watching the news or reading the news altogether. A recent report from the Pew Foundation shows that about 40% of Americans actively avoid the news. Now, I'm not going to ask you to identify yourself, right? In a crowd like this, there's probably very few of you, right? But news avoidance is a strategy related to the issue of media and mental health, isn't it? Right? Because sometimes you have to escape the news in order to reduce your anxiety, right? To manage the complex moods that you have. And then, down at the bottom there, AI impact on the knowledge economy. And that's a big question mark. So when you asked me to come and talk about AI and media literacy, I had to put it in context. We can't talk about AI apart from any of these other things. And you might identify which one is number one important for you, but really it's important for us to recognize how they all hang together. And that's complicated. Now, if these are the problems, Lord knows with so many smart people in the world, there are a lot of solutions. Like, some people have proposed that we invest in quality journalism, and some of the major philanthropies are coming together to establish a fund that would support local journalism initiatives which no longer can work on the marketplace model, but with philanthropic help, maybe local journalism can thrive. Some people are trying to create new kinds of news and information formats. We're going to take a look at some of those tonight. Some people want to incentivize digital platforms like Facebook and Google, Amazon, to increase their accountability, like provide incentives to have them be good citizens and responsible for the harms that their platforms might cause. Some people think we have to change the social norms among business and civic leaders when it comes to media industry and all the industries that touch on media. Some people think that there's like a more structural solution needed in terms of strengthening our civic institutions. They see the media-related issues in relation to the decline of other social institutions. Some people want to increase research investment in media and society issues. You know how shocking and embarrassing it is. I'm going to go to Brussels next week, as Nicole mentioned, and every country in Europe, all 27 members, they have a federal agency that measures children and media issues. In the UK, they measure it every year. They measure children and media issues to find out about children's ability to critically analyze advertising, children's vulnerability to certain kinds of cyberbullying. In the United States, we don't have any federal agency or any part of any federal agency that does formal scientific studies of children and media. It's just unbelievable. And so philanthropies and private firms have to do it. Maybe we could invest research money into media and society issues, and that might help alleviate some of these problems. Maybe we could punish hate speech and other harmful forms of expression to dial down the divide. Maybe we could increase regulation of digital platforms. Members of Congress bring the owners of the platforms to Congress and yell at them, but maybe we could regulate them, right? As we do with other media outlets. And then maybe we could increase citizens' resilience and media literacy competencies. For the last 35 years, in every gathering I ever go to, media literacy is always at the bottom of the list. It's there, but it's always at the bottom of the list. So tonight I'm going to put it at the top of the list and talk to you a little bit about what if we do that? What if that's the only thing we can do? What would that be all about? Well, as you can imagine, my phone began ringing in 2016, and it kind of hasn't stopped. The fake news crisis made people aware that there was a thing called media literacy, that it involved critically analyzing what you watch, see, listen to, and read, and people knew that that wasn't happening, it wasn't happening enough, and so, wow, I got all kinds of great opportunities, right? Including, for example, the opportunity to work with police instructors at the Austin Police Academy, right down the road. Police instructors recognize how long before you become a police officer, you've learned about crime and law enforcement from the media. So how might police officers learn to critically analyze the media about their own work? Because police officers are overrepresented in media, right? All those crime shows, all those CSI, all that. I mean, they're everywhere in media. So they need to learn media literacy skills too. So all kinds of issues since 2016 have brought media literacy forward into attention, and now we're all worried about generative AI. Why? Because what the heck is it going to do to creative expression? And how is it going to affect jobs? Boy, you've heard and seen lots of news about that, and if you're not familiar, those 3 slides that I just showed you, I created them at Break Your Own News, breakyourownnews.com. You take any image, you type in any headline, you type in any ticker tape, you press download, and boom, Break Your Own News. So it's interesting how this little tool tricks us, because it uses the format that's familiar, right? The TV news familiar format. But this is a form of play, right? This way of presenting ideas and information. What's not as funny but really important to look at is the business model for digital platforms. So we've got Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, and the one that's not on the chart is the big Chinese company, Alibaba. Those are the 5 biggest companies in the world. Not just the 5 biggest media companies, but the 5 biggest companies in the world. So we have to recognize that the economy now could be understood as a technocracy, a society that is dominated by digital platforms, right? And this shift in the media ecosystem has important implications that we're all like living through and trying to figure out. And none of us have really figured it out completely, but we do start to understand how that every click, every like, every share is captured in a great big database and monetized. It turns out that the product that Facebook and Google are selling is your attention. Because after all, their products are free. And what they're selling is their ability to predict your behavior. Based on your likes, clicks, and shares, I think you're going to buy a pair of shoes in the next 3 months. And here's the data that proves why I think you are. Right? That's valuable to people who are trying to increase their revenue. And about 3 years ago, Shoshana Zuboff wrote this great book called Surveillance Capitalism. She's a professor at the Harvard Business School, and she basically said that we're all participating in a new kind of economy that is really generated by our data. But we don't own our data, right? And we don't really have much control over how our data is being used. The implications of surveillance capitalism and the phenomenal amount of money that algorithmic personalization has pumped into these companies is why AI is where it's at. Because with the size of these companies and the profits of these companies, lots of money to invest in research and development to develop these new technologies. So we understand how related AI is to this business model of surveillance capitalism. Now everybody, and I mean everybody, is trying to answer this question. The world wants to regulate AI, but does not quite know how. Right? And when I go to Brussels next week, I'm going to hear more about that. And it turns out that there's some, not only disagreement over what is to be policed, but how and by whom. So don't hold your breath on the idea that regulation of generative AI is going to be a solution, because we're still in the very earliest days of even thinking about it. what we're all starting to appreciate is how generative AI brings to us some affordances, some great things, and also some risks. And we're learning to consider both the benefits and the potential harms of generative AI. And that aligns really importantly with a concept in media literacy, sometimes called the protection and empowerment dialectic. Protection and empowerment are two sides of the same coin. What do I mean by that? Well, I really appreciate how when I use my digital media, I hardly ever see an ad for something I'm not interested in. It's very efficient from my point of view, right? I don't get angry at ads anymore like I used to, right? I don't see any stuff that's irrelevant for me. I get old lady ads because guess what? I'm an old lady, right? So they're all wonderful, useful, and truthfully have streamlined some of my buying decisions. I'm happy with algorithmic personalization. But I also see how algorithmic personalization has kind of trapped me a little bit because I'm a researcher. I used to actually search for products. Do you remember back when you used to search for products? Before products just showed up? Remember when you had to go type in the words fishing rod, right? And then you had to go to a website and look at the fishing rods on the website. Man, is that old-fashioned. Right? You might do that still, but not really. Because the fishing rod ads are right there on your feed. They just show up. And that's a blessing and a curse. Right? And the legacy of that is still something we don't fully understand. One thing we are getting used to is interacting with AI-generated people. And you have all done this. Remember, because I'm an old lady, when I get my prescriptions refilled at the CVS, right, or the Walgreens, I type in the number. The machine says, Dr. Hobbs, I remember that you're getting some of that Celebrex for your knee problem. Would you like a refill? Click 1 for yes, click 2 for no, click, click, click. I don't have to talk to a person. I've refilled my prescription with 3 taps and clicks. And you've used your Siri or your Alexa and said, is it going to rain today? Right? Will my flight be delayed? How much snow will there be in Boston? Because we're all beginning to use digital assistants in different ways. And it's coming to us gradually and slowly, so we're getting used to it. You're also beginning to interact with AI-generated propaganda. Here are 2 examples, one from Brazil. Sergio para el futuro. That's a political campaign poster generated by AI. How totally efficient, right? No need to hire a designer, right? An artist, use the text to image translator, blah, 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 and poof, it gets created. And then there's the other one, which really takes some close looking at. Take a look at it. What do you see? That is the Statue of Liberty, I guess, with her torch in one hand and her, is that an AK-47 in the other? And does it say, democratic and freedoms, everything is being thrown away, the goddess of violence? Oh, awful. Not to mention there's grammatically it's just not correct. Created by Chinese disinformation experts and distributed to Facebook accounts all over the United States. Right? Because destabilizing societies is a form of information warfare, and information warfare is documented to go all the way back to the Greeks. Right? Information warfare is a timeless part of warfare. Right? You trick, fool, seduce, or confuse your enemy so they are not as effective as a fighting force. And that's happening like crazy from Russia, China, Iran, and other countries. And how cheap and easy it is to do with AI. Now, take a look at this. Wow. From the MIT Technology Review, OpenAI teases an amazing new generative video model called Sora. The firm is sharing Sora with a small group of safety testers, but the rest of us will have to wait to learn more. So what you're looking at is a 1-minute high-definition video that was produced by somebody who wrote the following words into the generative AI platform. A couple walking in springtime while snow is falling in downtown Tokyo. Boom. It's beautiful. Created in seconds by generative AI. So let's just acknowledge our complicated generative AI issue. Generative AI creates unreal realities, just as language and media and technology have always created unreal realities. Scholars of language have often said, how did we invent storytelling and songs? It's like, well, we discovered the power of language to change people's understanding of reality, to be the storyteller's view of reality. And we've been creating unreal realities for thousands of years. So in some senses, generative AI is just more of what we've been doing all along, right? And I really love this, I don't know, was it a woodcut, a linotype? Because there's the technology, right? It's a projection technology. And there's the monster, right? But it's shadows and light. It's shadows and light. The problem is that we process images neurologically like we process reality. They do these cool experiments where they take somebody and they wire up their brain and they have them run. Then they put them in the MRI and they have them watch a video of somebody running. The same neurons light up for running when you're watching running and when you're actually running. We process images the same way we process lived experience. So, in a sense, we're really vulnerable to these unreal realities. So media literacy has long made the argument that all forms of media are different types of texts. Texts that need to be read and interpreted just like any other. In fact, we've worked hard to try to make sure that when people see the word text, they don't think little black squiggles on white paper, but they think the symbolic forms used to convey meaning. Because text can take many forms. Media literacy and other scholars in the humanities have tried to redefine the concept of authorship. When I was at the University of Michigan studying English literature, authorship was Emily Dickinson, writing her queer little poems in her garret, right? And putting them in a drawer, right? And then her publisher pulling them out of the drawer and putting them into a book. That was it. An author was an artist and a businessman. But now we're understanding that authorship is bigger than that. It's the people, the platforms, and the processes that are used to construct meaning through symbols. And holding on to our old-fashioned ideas about authorship may not serve us in a world where people, platforms, and processes are how symbols get constructed. And if texts are defined that way and authorship is defined that way, then literacy can be understood as the sharing of meaning. We're using symbols to do that. Right now I'm using language, that's the symbol system, and I'm using images as well, right? But I do want to brag about my own little artistry with AI. I said to Canva AI, which is a free tool to use online, many of you have tried it out, I want a picture that kind of symbolizes the beautiful sunshine of Texas that I'm going to go to, because it's rainy and cold in Rhode Island. And I wanted to say something about all the different media forms. And it produced a pretty good job, except I do want to call your attention to, notice this weird hand coming out of the book. Okay, that's creepy. So, when you look carefully at AI, you can often spot an AI, because that's pretty what's that thumb doing there? Right? But hey, it's there. So we've got these new concepts, but these old concepts that are changing and transforming their meaning because media and technology are changing. So these are the 6 words that we tend to use most often in media literacy. We define media literacy as the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. And we define media literacy education as the educational field dedicated to teaching the skills associated with media literacy. Deeper down, we have kind of 4 big approaches to media literacy. Critical media literacy is an inquiry-based media literacy practice concerned specifically with critically examining structures, systems, ideologies, representations, and power. Information literacy is a set of skills supporting the ability to discern when information is needed, including the ability to find, analyze, evaluate, use, and reflect on the needed information. Digital literacy is a subset of media literacy that focuses on the skills and knowledge that are involved in learning to use digital tools. And news literacy is the ability to determine the credibility of news by understanding and recognizing the standards, practices, ethics of professional journalism. Most people are most familiar with news literacy because journalism has a crisis happening. Their business model is failing, right? Most news organizations are losing money like crazy, and many journalists believe that the problem is that people don't appreciate journalism. And if news literacy is more common, then people would appreciate quality journalism. And maybe they'd be willing to pay for it. These 4 different approaches, when they get together at a conference, I'm speaking to some academics, I think, in the room, and also community members, but the academics in the room will be very familiar with this. When these people get together at a conference, they circle the wagons and fire in, right? They beat each other up, right? With each one thinking their approach is superior. But I like to think of these approaches with the parable of the blind men and the elephant. Do you guys know that parable? Once upon a time, there was a bunch of blind men, and they each went up to the elephant. One guy felt the trunk and he said, the elephant is like a wall. And the other guy felt the tail and said, the elephant is like a rope, right? And it turns out they were all right, but they were all feeling the same creature. So we argue about these terms, but really it's all part of these new competencies. They're complicated because media is complicated. Now in the United States, this is the approach we use in the United States. In Europe, they don't do it this way. This is the model they use mostly in Europe. They categorize media literacy into 3 big chunks. Being online, which is all about access and inclusion, learning and creativity, media and information literacy. Well-being online, that's about ethics and empathy, health and well-being, e-presence and communication. And rights online, active participation, rights and responsibilities, privacy and security, consumer awareness. A completely different way to slice and dice the ideas, but here's the big idea. Media literacy is a moving target. It keeps changing because it changes in response to media, technology, and society. When I was trying to write a dissertation back in the 80s, the media literacy that existed was focused on violence and substance abuse prevention. In the 80s, when cable television came in and there were 500 channels to watch, the focus of media literacy was on learning to make informed and responsible choices. In the 90s, when the standards movement came in, media literacy was really about literacy. And in the 2000s, the librarians really helped us understand that information literacy were the core fundamental skills to being a citizen of a knowledge economy. And in 2015, news literacy came into the fore just in time for the fake news crisis. And then now we're talking about algorithm literacy. And 3 years from now, who knows what it will be? And 10 years from now, who knows what it will be? But I thought it would be useful for you to learn a little bit about what media literacy looks like in the United States, and particularly what it looks like in Texas. So 18 states have media literacy on the books right now, and that's happened just in the last 5 years, right? So each state regulates education differently, in elementary and secondary education, that is. And so these are the states where media literacy has got some law that says it has to be done. Texas, once upon a time, was a pioneer in media literacy. In 1998, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills included their definition of literacy to be worded like this. They said, literacy is reading and writing, speaking and listening, and viewing and representing, right? The idea was literacy is reading and writing in all those different forms. Reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, and representing. That was phenomenal. Because when Texas did this, and Florida did something similar, and all of a sudden, and then California did something, all of a sudden, half of American children were getting some kind of introduction to media literacy from their English teachers. In 2010, Texas changed their English language arts and reading standards, and viewing and representing went away. And I don't know the answer to why. There's only one scholarly article written about that, a master's thesis from a young woman who interviewed everybody and tried to get the story, but I'm not sure why it went away, but it still had some pieces. English language arts teachers were told to help students identify forms and purposes, explain positive and negative impacts of advertising, compare and contrast how a single event is portrayed by visual images versus non-visual text, evaluate how messages reflect social and cultural views, evaluate techniques used to create a point of view in media and the impact on the audience, and examining how individual perception or bias in the coverage of the same event influences the audience. Okay, that's cool. In 2017, we saw a plethora of elective courses that looked like media literacy might happen in them. High school elective courses in contemporary media, visual analysis and production, journalism, broadcast journalism, and photojournalism. That's awesome. And in 23, just in the last legislative session, Texas adopted the civics training program, which says students in high schools in Texas should engage in classroom discussion of current events. Media literacy, including instruction on verifying information and sources, identifying and responding to logical fallacies, and identifying propaganda, and strategies for incorporating civics instruction into subject areas other than social studies. And this is all very good news except for one thing. Teachers are scared out of their minds to do this. And I mean, they're scared out of their minds. When I wrote my book, Mind Over Media, Propaganda Education in a Digital Age, I could only identify 60 teachers in the entire country who were actively teaching the persuasive genres, like political campaign advertising, sponsored content, nudging, and all the other persuasive strategies that are used in the world. But every teacher who does media literacy relies on one or more of these three pedagogical practices. These are what we would call the core instructional practices of media literacy. And when I talk to you about these, you'll realize it's happening. You're doing it, right? And you're learning it because these are the practices that help build critical thinking skills about media. The first one is close reading. Students examine a media text and demonstrate their comprehension of it by explaining ideas in their own words. They identify information about the author and the purpose, they verify the accuracy, they analyze how language, image, and other techniques are used to attract attention, arouse emotion, convey values, and they study persuasive, informational, or entertaining texts. Close reading is really important in helping people understand how values, ideologies, and points of view are embedded in media messages. Dialogue and discussion is a core pedagogy of media literacy because in dialogue and discussion, students work in groups, they explore a topic of interest to them, they gather information, they share their interpretations with others, they reflect on their strategic communication choices, and consider the potential benefits or harms of the media messages they selected and interpreted. Discussion and dialogue builds intellectual curiosity. And it also helps learners develop trust, respect, and a sense of belonging as they connect with others. And creative expression is working alone or with a small group. Students learn about a topic or issue and then create some form of media to represent their understanding, like a slogan, a logo, a campaign material, maybe video or a meme, an infographic or a podcast. They circulate those messages in their own social network. That is, they don't just hand it to the teacher for a grade. They put it out into the world. I call these create to learn activities, and they help learners visualize themselves as change agents. So now, as a teacher or as a student, give me a big Texas wave if you have engaged in one or more of these three practices: close reading, dialogue and discussion, or create to learn. Yeah! So it's happening, media literacy is happening all over Texas and all over San Angelo University campus. I wanted to talk a little bit about creativity in relation to digital media and technology. And all the video examples that I'm going to use in this next part of the talk come from TikTok, and you know why, right? So I have been fascinated with the group of TikTokers who are they sometimes call themselves history geeks. Let's take a look at some of their creators. We're going to look at somebody who's making a TikTok about the Odyssey, First Contact, and Gilded Age politics. Let's take a look. These are students in high school. Natives minding their business. Thousands of European settlers. So these artifacts are 10 seconds in length, right? And some creativity and care was put into creating them. And they weren't doing it for a grade. They were doing it for fun, right? They were doing it for fun, right? Because participating in a community of creative people is fun. So I wanted to try to figure out how to measure whether American students were getting media literacy. And that is complicated because you can't see into the hundreds of thousands of classrooms in the United States. But Rhode Island is a very small state. Very small state. So tiny. Oh my goodness. It's not as small as this town, but it's practically as small as this town. And here's the thing. We developed a really nice 16-item measure. We basically asked teachers, students, parents, and school leaders, do your students get the opportunity to do these things? These are the production-related things, the creative things. Do students in the elementary grades get to tell a story by adapting a book into a media genre, or creating a storyboard or a script, or creating an imaginary world with characters in conflict? And Rhode Island teachers, 29% of them said, yeah, 29% of Rhode Island kids are getting to do that. In middle school, are students getting to work in team-based production, working collaboratively to create a video? And is that work viewed by parents in the school community? 26% of students said yes, participants said yes to that. Creating a public service announcement, where you choose a topic and you create a persuasive public service campaign message designed to raise awareness, promote a cause or event, or motivate people to take action. Heartbreakingly, only 16% of Rhode Island kids get that opportunity. And in high school, do students get an opportunity to present a strong point of view, to be advocates, to write an article or create a media presentation? About half, right? So in our measurement of students' exposure to media literacy implementation, it brings up this messy question. Are media formats and digital technologies reproducing, transforming, or challenging the educational status quo? And that's something we need to think really hard about, right? About how technologies are used transformatively, and also how they're used to do the same old, same old. Now, as I bring my presentation to a close, I want to talk a little bit about the implications of living in personalized media worlds. My students are influenced by different influencers, fitness influencers, wellness influencers, geeky sociology influencers, right? And they don't have the same kind of common ground media experience the way I remember growing up. Each of them has a customized, personalized feed of content that might be completely unfamiliar to their peers. So we're going to take a look at a TikTok video that my students brought to my attention.
Okay, so we have one of the wildest stories I've ever heard coming out of Rhode Island right now. And by reading this headline, you would think this is some big scandal, right? I mean, you make the call, apparently there's 2 kids in the North Kingstown, Rhode Island school district that are identifying as cats, and they have been given litter boxes in the bathroom. Keep in mind, this isn't some like satirical troll article by The Onion or someone. This is being reported by like ABC 6 News. This is where it gets weird. Superintendent Michael Waterman is saying, oh, this is false. It's a shame somebody would start this rumor about the staff and kids in the North Kingstown School Department. Meanwhile, the parents and the town councilwoman, Mary Brimer, who broke this report, are saying, no, this should be investigated and not pushed aside. Because apparently the parents are the source of this story breaking. Apparently there's a kid hissing at other students. Apparently from these 2 quotes, the North Kingstown School District is like marred in controversy. Apparently, I've never heard anything about it, but hey. And then we have a North Kingstown School Committee member, Jennifer Lee, saying in a statement that the NKSD is not providing litter boxes, but they will not comment on the whole cat thing. This is just, I don't know, man, there's mental health issues here. This is just, we just get further and further in the bizarro world, and it has to stop at some point. So, I don't fucking know, man.
Whoa. All right. So that illustrates something that social media does really well. It scares you. It scares you and it makes you angry, right? It scares you and it makes you angry and it makes you go, ugh! My students brought this to me because they were scared, they were angry, and they didn't automatically engage in the very skills of media literacy that are so important, like asking, what's accurate and inaccurate about this message? Who's making money from this message? What's left out of this message? How does this message align with my values? That's the values check button. What's the real message here if I'm reading between the lines? Stereotype alert. Solutions too easy. And record save for later. Is this worth paying attention to or not? When we talk through those questions, my students, through dialogue and discussion, come to realize that this author, Mark Lewis, is a conflict entrepreneur. He's making money from stirring up controversy. He's seeming to be credible because he's got that news story behind him. Doesn't he look credible? Because he's got that news story behind him. So he seems very credible, right? So it seems accurate. But I have to take an extra step. I can't just watch it, feel the feels, and swipe away. I have to take an extra step if I'm really going to understand this artifact, this peculiar and interesting little piece of media. I have to engage in something that's called lateral reading for verification. I have to investigate the source, who made it, and what's the reputation. I have to check the claim. Is it credible, and are other credible sources agreeing with it? And I have to trace the information back. What was the original source? Has the information changed in the retelling? And it doesn't take very long for my students to find this.
Over 20 politicians have spread false claims that schools are providing cat litter to students who identify as animals or furries. So how exactly did this slide become a talking point for so many GOP politicians? Ruth can explain in less than 60 seconds. The trend seems to have started on social media, where parents were debating gender identity and educational accommodations. The story was shared on Joe Rogan's podcast and in several now viral TikTok videos, all of which are vague and provide no evidence. It was also shared by a number of politicians, including Reps Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Many politicians even named specific school districts where this was allegedly happening. But NBC News recently contacted every school district politicians had name dropped, and not a single one had set out litter boxes for students who identify as animals or furries. In fact, the only school district that did have cat litter on campuses was Colorado's Jefferson County, and that litter was in the district's go buckets, which are stocked with emergency supplies for lockdowns and school shootings. Over 20 politicians have spread false claims that...
Okay, all right. That gave me some new information, but who is this person? Right? And what's her source? Well, 2 or 3 clicks gets me here. Brut. Brut is a French media company that creates short-form video content that's under 1 minute in length. For audiences around the world, they publish content daily in 3 languages and across 8 social platforms, generating over 1.5 billion views a month. This is perhaps the biggest news media company you never heard of, right? They're influencing and informing and entertaining and persuading using short-form media, mostly on TikTok, but also on the socials as well. I think the practice of asking critical questions about what you watch, see, and read is so foundational that we need to apply it to everything. And so I want to tackle this issue, and I hope you don't mind. Fear is on the rise. And just, was it 2 days ago now? 1 woman killed, 22 people shot, including 11 children. So as you're swiping and swiping and feeling and swiping and feeling, it's possible that you could come across something like this. It's a cocktail party napkin. It shows a cycle that starts with mass shooting and then goes to media extravaganza, followed by thoughts and prayers, followed by social media gun debates, followed by no one actually does anything, back to quote-unquote normal, back to mass shooting. And the first question we have to ask about this media artifact is, how does it make you feel? And this cocktail party napkin might make you feel helpless and hopeless, sad, maybe angry. But in the normal course of your media consumption, you will feel the feels and swipe, and feel the feels and swipe, and feel the feels and swipe. Because that's how we use media now. But when we ask these critical questions, this artifact gets much more interesting. Who is the author and what is the purpose? Well, it's posted by somebody named Angry Neighborhood Feminist. But I'm not sure she created the cocktail party napkin, right? She posted it. What's her purpose? Well, she writes underneath, 11 are dead from the Monterey Park shooting at the Lunar New Year, and the motive is still unclear. That was the racially motivated killing, murder of Asian American women in California. Was her motive to make me feel helpless and hopeless? I don't think so. Her hashtag says end gun violence. So she had a motive, but I'm not sure if she was successful in her. I'm not sure what her motive was. What techniques are used to attract and hold your attention? Well, those arrows going round and round and round, they catch my attention. The phrase media extravaganza catches my attention because that makes me think about the business model for media, private gain or public good. It makes me realize that when bad news happens like mass shootings, that is profitable for CNN, right? That's good for the news business. Because now people are going to be watching to find out about that story. What happened, what happened, what happened. So the extravaganza has a profoundly economic motivation. I struggle with that phrase, no one actually does anything. And when I see that phrase, my reality check button starts blinking. That's the part of the remote control, the media literacy model that says what's accurate and inaccurate about this message. And I look at that and I go, no one actually does anything? I don't think that's accurate. After the mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, a whole bunch of teenage kids worked really hard for 3 years to change gun laws in Florida. Those kids looking at this, they'd be angry. How dare you say nobody actually does anything? Because they did. And then there's the back to normal. When I see that, I want to hit the values check button. Because there's something about that line that makes me understand the motive of the author who created this curious little artifact, this meme. What she's really angry about is that. How normal it is becoming and how wrong it is that it is becoming normal. And so I think it's really important to recognize how baked in violence is to our media ecosystem. Because media and digital platforms have a lot of incentives to celebrate violence because fear sells. And when we're media literate, when we understand the media ecosystem and the way in which our emotions are commodified for profit, then I think it makes it a lot easier for us to take that extra step to stop, to ask critical questions, and to begin to take responsibility for the many, many unreal realities that we're surrounded with today. Thank you very much.